Hey friends, I want to show you my friend Corey. And Corey's one of the missionaries in the Kansas City Underground. He's baptizing Vincent. He met Vincent in the county jail system in Johnson County. And he was serving as a volunteer there, and small talk turned into spiritual conversations, and he invited Vincent to do a Discovery Bible study. It's a simple, reproducible form of Bible engagement that has a multiplying, disciple-making DNA at its heart. And Vincent is a person of peace. He's a connector. He's an influencer. He's a relational gatekeeper for this whole network in the jail system. And he met Jesus, come on, through that Discovery Bible study. Amazing Grace lit up his life, and it lit up his whole network. And get this, in a matter of months, there were Discovery Bible studies in every cell of that jail system. It started to feel and look like Acts 2, filling souls and filling the cell blocks. And now, those freshly redeemed guys, as they're exiting the jail, they've formed a new extended spiritual family we call a microchurch. And that microchurch, you can see right here, they're just doing, oh, we're missing a picture. That's okay. I'm going back. See, I fell on my face, so now you can do it after me, right? It'll be all good. So this microchurch, they're doing life together around Jesus, around a table, around shared resources and shared mission. And that one microchurch is multiplied to 5 microchurches. They've now started Discovery Bible studies in 3 jail systems in 3 different counties, and they have a game plan to take Discovery Bible studies to every halfway house in Kansas City. So in other words, this story's just started. I also want to introduce you to John and Heather Grisham. They're doctors in our city. Their missionary identity has been activated by the Kansas City Underground. They feel called to 2 different populations: the Algerian immigrant community, and also, of course, their neighborhood. And in both places, they started with a posture of prayer. They started by listening, being curious, understanding the story of their neighbors and their neighborhood. They activated their table and hospitality. They found creative ways to serve, all with the hope of being able to share the good news about Jesus and how Jesus has changed their lives. Well, 18 months into that intentional, incarnational engagement, they had their first spiritual conversation with their next-door neighbors after a bike ride. And we find this is pretty common, actually, in suburban context. It takes 18 to 24 months to really see traction. And right after that, COVID hits, total lockdown in Kansas City. You would think everything would be frozen, but the Holy Spirit inspired them to start a Discovery Bible study online. And you can imagine they were holding their breath that first evening. And they were wondering, is anyone going to show up from our neighborhood? And 6 families showed up to discover the truth about Jesus, to find hope in a time of fear. They were amazed. They were calling me. They were just lit up, excited, because I'm their coach. Well, a week later, John's taking out the garbage, and they know who the person of peace is in their neighborhood. It's a woman who's lived there 30-something years, and she yelled across the street as she was taking her garbage out, "Hey, John, did you guys do that Bible thing online?" He said, "We sure did." She said, "How many families showed up?" He said, 6. And she was kind of offended. 6, because she wasn't there. 6 families? Well, I'm going to be there next week, and I'm going to bring some friends, because she's the matriarch. Nothing goes on in the neighborhood without her permission, you know? And sure enough, she shows up next week. Guess what? She brought 7 families with her. They had 13 families discovering Jesus together in this virtual table. As the lockdown is lifted, it's become an actual table, and it's a microchurch that's emerged. And they're living around the rhythms of worship, community, and mission. Now, what changed in those 2 different situations? Culturally very different. There was a missionary disciple maker who was introduced into the ecosystem. And when you introduce a missionary disciple maker into a new ecosystem, it's like putting a seed into the soil. And inside of the seed, there can be a whole new forest. And inside a missionary disciple maker is a whole new forest of disciples and also orchards of microchurches. And about 2 years ago, we launched the Kansas City Underground to equip ordinary people to be missionary disciple makers in their context. Our vision is this: we want to fill Kansas City with the beauty, justice, and good news of Jesus. It's based off of Ephesians chapter 1. Jesus is filling everything every way, and it's our privilege to manifest that fullness, to make that tangible in Kansas City. And our vision to see that happen is a missionary in every street and a microchurch in every network of relationships. See, a missionary in every street and a microchurch in every network of relationships would bring a gospel presence, a gospel demonstration, and a gospel proclamation that's relational enough, adaptable enough, are you with me? Scalable enough to fill a whole city with all its cultural diversity. Because a gospel presence, what we're talking about is it's missionaries embedded into every unreached pocket of people and microchurches that emerge from new disciples. And a gospel demonstration, it's acts of service that make sense in that context, and it's signs and wonders and God showing up with his kingdom breaking through. And it's also gospel proclamation, people declaring, here's how Jesus has changed me, and the gospel changes everything. And missionaries and microchurches can fill a city like yeast in the dough. And so we're organized with what we call a two-entity structure. We have these decentralized networks of missionaries and microchurches, and then we have what we call a mission agency. And this mission agency equips ordinary people to know how to plant themselves deeply, incarnationally, to know how to plant the gospel, to know how to make new disciples, and then to help lead these new extended spiritual families that are orbiting around Jesus. And you may have already picked this up already, but we have 4 organizing identities. The first one is that of a missionary. A missionary is an ordinary person who plants themselves among an unreached pocket of people. They plant the gospel and they make new disciples. We have microchurches. A microchurch is a new extended spiritual family. They're seeking to live in everyday gospel community, and they're led by ordinary people who are owning the mission of Jesus in their network of relationships. We also have collectives. So Corey's story, that is a collective that we call Share the Hope. It's a network now of 5 microchurches. And when we see a network of microchurches emerge from multiplication, whether it's by geography or affinity, then what you have is a new network that we call a collective. And it's through the collective that we begin to identify elders that provide oversight and hyper-local shepherding and care. And they have shared resources, shared mission, and if they want to, shared gatherings. And then finally, the hub. And the hub is there to empower and equip the missionaries, the microchurches, and the collectives. And I'm here today to ask for your partnership to help us launch 2 new hubs in our city. You can see here our 2-entity structure. On the one side of the umbrella is the mission agency or the hub. On the other side is this decentralized network of missionaries and microchurches. And what the hub is, at the core, it's a Navy SEAL team of equippers. And they're equipping ordinary people to know how to plant the gospel, make disciples, and when a microchurch emerges, to help that microchurch to grow deeper in shalom as the family of God and also multiplication. And what a hub provides is equipping, resourcing, support, healing, energy, and multiplication of missionaries and microchurches in a region of a city. And it's a game changer. It's a force multiplier. And what happens is when you introduce a hub into this part of the city to support the missionaries and the microchurches that are there, it accelerates mission. It accelerates gospel saturation. Right now, we have 4 different hub teams that we're equipping to launch in new places of our city. And to get the gospel saturation in our city, we think it's going to take 25 to 30 hub teams of equippers scattered throughout the city, so every missionary and microchurch is proximate to an equipping team that's incarnational and in their neck of the woods. And the next 2 that we're launching, to tell you briefly about them, one of them is in North Kansas City, Kansas, and it's in a very ethnically diverse community. And this particular hub is focused on planting the gospel in every immigrant population in Kansas City. That's 90 plus communities. They're activating missionaries who are living among them, starting Discovery Bible studies, making new disciples, seeing microchurches emerge, and they're going to reach the nations that God has already brought to our city. And then the other hub is being activated in the urban core of Kansas City, Missouri. It's a stone's throw from Troost Avenue, which is the symbolic dividing line between the white and black population in Kansas City. And I want to help you see how potent the hub is. 10 years ago, I was in a conversation with Alex Absalon at an exponential conference. Remember when we used to have those back in the day? And I was asking Alex about multiplication in missional communities or microchurches. And Alex has 30 years of experience. He knows his stuff. And he said, here's something I've noticed, and I think you're going to see this over and over again. You'll see sharp leaders and sharp teams that are trying to go missional community and microchurch in their city get to a network of about 3 to 5 microchurches, and then it will stop. And you're going to see this pattern over and over and over again. And it just sort of burned itself in my brain. And when I moved to Kansas City 7 years ago, and spending the first couple years just trying to understand the story of our city, both in a macro and historical way, but also with the church.